The desert sun showed no mercy as it blazed overhead. Beneath its scorching rays, a young woman huddled against the weathered remains of a Joshua tree. Large, spiky leaves were all she had to cover her exposed flesh. Her skin gleamed with perspiration, dirt, and crimson stains from fresh wounds. Emma Harper was barely 26 years old, yet her appearance told of suffering that aged her far beyond her years. She pressed the makeshift covering against her trembling form, desperate for any protection from prying eyes and the merciless heat. Her knees drew up to her chest as wild auburn hair cascaded across her face like a curtain of shame. Every mark on her body spoke of terror and violence. Dark bruises painted her arms and shoulders. Deep scratches carved lines across her calves. A jagged gash along her ribs leaked slowly into the parched ground beneath her. This brutality was nothing new. Her husband Marcus had shattered her spirit piece by piece, day after brutal day. His possessive fury knew no bounds. Even a polite greeting to a shopkeeper would earn her his wrath. Each beating grew more savage. Each night she begged heaven for deliverance. This dawn, the violence had crossed a line she could no longer endure. She had seized her moment, bolting from their cabin into the wilderness beyond. Barefoot and barely clothed, driven by desperation alone. She ran until her lungs felt ready to burst, every stride tearing the soles of her feet against sharp stones and thorns. The blazing sun nearly blinded her.
Ow.
But freedom was worth any price. She wanted nothing more than to live. She believed she had finally escaped the demon who tormented her. But cruel fate had one final blow to deliver. A solitary rider blocked her path. Though he was not Marcus, the menace in his cold stare was unmistakable. Emma pleaded for mercy, her voice breaking with exhaustion. Her body shook uncontrollably. But compassion was absent from his heart. The wasteland fell silent, except for the sounds of struggle. Emma fought with what little strength remained, clawing, kicking, screaming, but her body had nothing left to give. He forced her down among the brittle desert grass. Her cries echoed across the empty landscape, but no soul heard them. No rescue came. The merciless sun witnessed her world collapse once more. When the nightmare ended, the stranger mounted his horse and vanished without a backward glance. Leaving her shattered and bleeding in the dust, Emma crawled to the skeletal Joshua tree, pulling its sharp-edged leaves across her broken form. They offered meager shelter from the scorching rays above. Her chest rose and fell in ragged gasps as her mind sank into depths of shame and horror. She wished the earth would split open and claim her. She prayed the sky would strike her down where she lay. Every man in her life had proven to be a monster. Her husband, this faceless predator. Both had transformed her existence into a waking hell. She curled tighter against the dead tree, her tears evaporating instantly in the desert heat. Her lips moved in wordless prayer, not for salvation, but for release from this torment. The vast wasteland stretched endlessly around her. Dry brush swayed in the furnace wind. Hours crawled by until a new sound broke the silence. Hoofbeats approaching at a measured pace. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. She clutched the makeshift covering closer, her entire body quaking with fear. Was it the rider returning? Had Marcus already tracked her down? A shadow fell across her huddled form. She dared to raise her head slightly. A man dismounted from his bay horse, older than her tormentors, his weathered features bearing lines of sorrow mixed with quiet strength. He approached with careful, deliberate steps. Sunlight illuminated his grizzled face as Emma struggled to draw a breath. Was this yet another predator waiting to destroy what little remained of her spirit? Or could this be the one soul in this harsh land who might offer her salvation? Thomas Mitchell did not rush toward her. Instead, he stood motionless for several heartbeats, allowing the terrified woman to see his hands, both empty, both steady at his sides. He recognized the look of someone who had endured unspeakable trauma. Emma gazed up at him with eyes wide and glistening. Her frame shook as she gripped the thorny leaves against her chest. She was prepared to scream, to crawl away, to face another nightmare. But Thomas simply lowered his voice to speak as gently as possible. "You're safe now. Nobody will harm you again. You have my word." Something in his calm tone made her trembling subside momentarily. It carried no pity, no demands, only honest truth. Slowly, he removed the worn cotton shirt from his back. The garment was faded blue, sun-bleached and frayed at the edges, but still sturdy. He knelt beside her carefully and draped the shirt across her shoulders. Emma pulled it tight around herself, concealing her wounds and her humiliation. For the first time in hours, she felt slightly less vulnerable beneath the burning daylight. Her lips parted. But instead of words came only a small, broken sob. Thomas did not pressure her for explanations. He helped her stand with infinite care, as though she were made of delicate crystal. She leaned heavily against his solid frame while he guided her toward his waiting horse. His ranch lay not far away, a modest spread of land tucked well off the beaten trail, isolated enough that trouble usually passed it by. Once safely within his simple ranch house, Emma finally found her voice. The words poured out like a dam bursting. She described Marcus, her husband, and his jealous rages. How even the briefest glance at another person would trigger his fists. How every evening she dreaded the sound of his footsteps approaching. She explained that she had fled this time because she knew if she stayed, he would eventually murder her. Thomas listened without passing judgment. He poured her cool water in a tin cup, set bread and preserves on the rough wooden table, and positioned his chair close enough that she would not feel abandoned. When grief overwhelmed her, he allowed her tears. When exhaustion claimed her voice, he waited patiently. Then Emma looked at him with terror-filled eyes. "Please don't make me go back to him. If I return, he will kill me." Thomas leaned back in his chair, stroking his beard thoughtfully. He had encountered men like Marcus before, men who wore jealousy like battle armor, who viewed wives as possessions rather than human beings. Such men never stopped their violence voluntarily. Not until someone forced them to stop. The room held only the steady ticking of his old mantel clock. Emma sat across from him, wrapped in his oversized shirt, staring as if her entire future depended on his response. Would Thomas allow her to remain, knowing the storm that would surely follow? Or would he send her back into the clutches of the man who had already broken her spirit once? The morning after Emma shared her story, the ranch felt peaceful for the first time. She sat on the front porch wearing Thomas's faded shirt, watching sunrise paint the distant hills gold. For a brief moment, she almost dared to believe the nightmare was truly behind her, but tranquility never endures long in the untamed West. The thunder of galloping hooves shattered the calm. A dust cloud rose on the horizon. Thomas stepped outside, his jaw clenched tight. He knew the rider's identity before the man came into clear view. Marcus Harper reined his stallion to a halt. Directly before the porch steps, his eyes blazed with murderous rage, his voice booming louder than thunder across the desert. "Emma, get yourself over here this instant. You're coming home where you belong." Emma froze in her chair, gripping the shirt tighter around herself. She shook her head desperately, whispering, "No, please." But Marcus was already stomping up the wooden steps. He seized her arm with such violence that she cried out in pain. His voice turned even more venomous as he snarled, "You think you can run from me, woman? You think you can hide with this old fool? Everyone will know exactly what kind of whore you are." Before Emma could respond, Thomas was there. His iron grip clamped around Marcus's wrist, twisting hard enough to make the younger man gasp. Thomas's voice remained calm and measured, but carried unmistakable warning. "That's quite enough. You will not lay another finger on her." For a day or two, relative peace returned to the ranch. Emma tried to make herself useful with simple tasks, sweeping floors, gathering eggs from the henhouse, anything to feel worthwhile. Thomas watched her gradually regain some life in her cheeks and almost believed. Marcus might leave them alone, but in small frontier settlements, news travels swifter than wildfire. Marcus did not return with his fists this time. Instead, he rode into town and began spreading his poison. By sunset, half the saloon patrons were gossiping that Emma had abandoned her marriage to share another man's bed. By dawn, the livery stable owner was repeating it as established fact. By midday, even the minister's wife was clicking her tongue in disapproval. This was more than malicious gossip, it was deliberate. Character assassination. Marcus claimed he had discovered his wife in the embrace of old Thomas Mitchell. He proclaimed loudly in the streets that Emma had dishonored his good name. Some men laughed mockingly, others spat in disgust. Several nodded as though they had suspected her guilt all along. The worst part was Marcus's ominous threat. He declared that if the town retained any sense of moral decency, they would hang her for adultery and betrayal. When Thomas rode into town for supplies, he could feel hostile stares boring into him. Neighbors he had known for 2 decades refused to meet his gaze. A group of drifters muttered insults as he passed. One even spat deliberately near his boots. Thomas kept his head high with dignity. But anger burned in his chest, not for his own reputation, but for Emma's sake. She had endured enough suffering, and now the entire community was painting her as something vile. Back at the ranch, Emma heard the whispers too. A neighboring woman brought fresh milk, set it on the porch without a word, and departed swiftly. Emma stood holding the pitcher, feeling smaller and more worthless than ever before. Tears filled her eyes as she asked Thomas in a broken voice whether she would ever escape Marcus's shadow. Thomas placed his hand gently on her shoulder, speaking with quiet conviction. "You are not facing this alone. We will find a way to end his torment." That evening, as lamplight flickered low, Thomas saddled his horse once more. He told Emma there was only one man who possessed the authority to stop this madness, Sheriff Anderson. A lawman known for fairness, though sometimes slow to take action. If they could present the truth to him clearly, perhaps justice would finally stand on Emma's side. The moonlit ride into town felt ominous. Emma sat behind Thomas, clutching his shirt desperately, praying with every hoofbeat that this would provide the solution they needed, praying that justice could prove stronger than rumor and lies. But when they reached the sheriff's office and saw the angry crowd gathered outside, voices rising with righteous fury, one terrible question burned in both their minds. Would Sheriff Anderson stand with them? Or had the town already decided Emma deserved a hang? Sheriff Anderson emerged onto his office porch as the mob pressed closer, their voices rising like an approaching tornado. Some shouted accusations that Emma had betrayed her marriage vows. Others demanded immediate punishment for her supposed crimes. Thomas stood firmly beside her while Emma gripped his arm. Both facing the sea of hostile faces, Anderson raised his hand for silence, authoritative voice carrying across the town square. "I've known Thomas Mitchell for 25 years. He's no homewrecker, and I've seen Emma Harper tonight with my own eyes. She's not a woman of betrayal. She's a woman bearing the scars of abuse." The crowd shifted uncomfortably as uncertain murmurs rippled through their ranks. Thomas stepped forward, speaking with plain strength and conviction. "Marcus is the one who carved those scars into her flesh. He's the one who beats and terrorizes her. Is this the kind of man you choose to defend?" For the first time, Emma lifted her head with courage. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the night air like a blade. "I never betrayed my husband. I only fought to survive his violence." The silence that followed was profound. Even the most vocal accusers found their voices failing them. Sheriff Anderson nodded once with finality, then instructed 2 deputies to arrest Marcus Harper. The law had finally turned in favor of truth, and justice at last carried weight. Marcus Harper was led away in iron shackles, his protests of innocence fading as the crowd began to disperse. Emma leaned against Thomas's solid frame, tears streaming down her face. But for the first time, they were not tears born of pain alone. They were tears of liberation and hope. Days later, the ranch atmosphere had completely transformed. Emma helped Thomas repair a broken corral fence. The sun felt warm and welcoming rather than punishing, the air clean and fresh. She laughed softly at some gentle joke he shared the first time her smile was not haunted by fear in that vast and lonely wilderness. 2 souls who had been wounded in different ways discovered they could heal together. The desert that had once threatened to destroy Emma became the foundation of her freedom. And the man who saved her became something she had never dared to hope for, a partner who would protect rather than harm, cherish rather than control. The harsh land had tested them both, but in surviving its trials, they found something precious that neither had possessed before: the chance to build a life founded on respect, trust, and genuine love.